நேற்றைய தினம் பசில் ராஜபக்ஷவினுடைய பாராளுமன்ற வருகையோடு சேர்த்து 2 இராஜாங்க அமைச்சர்களுக்கான மாற்றங்களும் இடம்பெற்றிருக்கின்றன. இதனை அடுத்து நாட்டில் குடும்ப ஆட்சி தலைவிரித்து ஆடுகின்றது என்று தன்னுடைய காட்டமான விமர்சனங்களை எதிர்க்கட்சி தலைவர் சஜித் பிரேமதாச அவர்கள் முன்வைத்திருக்கின்றார். நேற்றைய தினம் ஜனாதிபதி கோட்டாபய ராஜபக்ஷவினுடைய முன்னிலையில் அமைச்சராக பசில் ராஜபக்ஷ அவர்கள் பதவி பிரமாணம் ஏற்றிருந்தார். அத்தோடு சமல் ராஜபக்ஷவினுடைய மகன் சசேந்திர ராஜபக்ஷ அவர்களுக்கும் உயர் தொழில்நுட்ப இராஜாங்க அமைச்சு பதவி வழங்கப்பட்டிருக்கின்றது நேற்றைய தினம். ஏற்கனவே பசிலின் வருகையில் பல சிக்கல்கள் இருந்தன. அத்தோடு அவருடைய இரட்டை பிரஜா உரிமை என்கின்ற விடயம் தொடர்பாக நீதிமன்றத்தில் வழக்கு தாக்கல் செய்யப்படவிருப்பதாகவும் தகவல்கள் வெளிவந்திருந்தன. இந்த நிலைமையில் தான் அவர் அமைச்சராகவும் பதவியேற்றிருக்கின்றார். இதேவேளை நாட்டில் பல்வேறு இடங்களில் இடம்பெற்றிருக்கின்ற ஆர்ப்பாட்டங்கள் கொடூரமான முறையில் அடக்கப்படுகின்றன என்கின்ற குற்றச்சாட்டுகளும் எழுந்திருக்கின்றன. பெண்கள், பிக்குகள் போன்றவர்கள் பாகுபாடின்றி கைது செய்யப்பட்டு பலவந்தமாக கைது செய்யப்பட்டு செல்வதாகவும் குற்றச்சாட்டுகள் முன்வைக்கப்பட்டிருக்கின்றன. நாட்டில் ராஜபக்ஷ குடும்பத்தினரின் ஆட்சி தலைவிரித்தாடுகின்றது. பசில் ராஜபக்ஷ நாடாளுமன்றம் வந்தமையும் நீதி அமைச்சராக பதவியேற்றமையும் நாட்டுக்கு எந்த விதத்திலும் நன்மையை தராது. இந்த காலம் நாட்டுக்கு அழிவு காலம். எனவே இந்த காலத்தை மாற்றி அமைக்க நாட்டை நேசிக்கும் அனைவரும் எம்முடன் கைகோர்க்க வேண்டும் என்று எதிர்க்கட்சி தலைவர் சஜித் பிரேமதாச அவர்கள் தன்னுடைய ஆதங்கத்தினை வெளியிட்டிருக்கின்றார். நேற்றைய தினம் நாடாளுமன்றத்தில் இடம்பெற்ற அமர்வுகளின் போதே சஜித் பிரேமதாச அவர்கள் இந்த கருத்தினை வெளியிட்டிருந்தார். அத்தோடு ஜோன் கொத்தலாவல பல்கலைக்கழகத்தில் மருத்துவத்துறை சார்பான சில விடயங்கள் சட்ட ரீதியாக முன்வைக்கப்படாமல் சட்டத்திற்கு புறம்பான வகையில் முன்வைக்கப்படுவதாக குற்றச்சாட்டுகள் முன்வைக்கப்பட்டிருந்தன. நாட்டில் பல்கலைக்கழக மானியங்கள் அனைத்து பல்கலைக்கழகங்களினுடைய அனுமதிகளையும் நிர்வகித்து வருகின்ற நிலைமையில் குறித்த பல்கலைக்கழகம் தனியாக இயங்குவதற்கு முயற்சிக்கப்படுகின்றது. அதற்கு தனியான அதிகாரங்கள் வழங்க முயற்சிக்கப்படுகின்றன என்கின்ற குற்றச்சாட்டு நேற்றைய தினம் நாடாளுமன்றத்தில் பரவலாக வைக்கப்பட்டிருந்தது. இந்த குற்றச்சாட்டின் மீது இரா சாணக்கியன் போன்றவர்களும் தங்களுடைய விவாதங்களினை முன்வைத்திருந்தமை குறிப்பிடத்தக்கது. ஆகவே நாடு கொஞ்சம் கொஞ்சமாக இராணுவமயமாக்கலுக்கு ஆட்பட்டு கொண்டிருக்கின்றது என்பதுவே எதிர்க்கட்சிகளினுடைய பிரதான குற்றச்சாட்டாக இருக்கின்றது. ஏற்கனவே சுகாதாரத்துறை முற்றுமுழுதாக இராணுவத்தினரின் வசமாகி இருப்பதாக குற்றச்சாட்டுகள் முன்வைக்கப்பட்டிருந்தன. இந்த நிலைமையில் கல்வி என்கின்ற விடயமும் இப்பொழுது இராணுவத்தினருடைய கைகளுக்கு வழங்கப்படுகின்றதா என்கின்ற கேள்வியினை எதிர்க்கட்சியினர் நாடாளுமன்றத்தில் எழுப்பியிருந்தார்கள்.
මේක ඉතාමත් පැහැදිලි. මෙතන කවුරු මොනවා කිව්වත් මේ ඇක්ට් එක බැලුවම මේක උසස් අධ්‍යාපන අමාත්‍යාංශය යටතේ නෙවෙයි එන්නේ. මේක ඩිෆෙන්ස් මිනිස්ටර් යටතේ එන පනතක්. ඒ වගේම තමයි මේකේ අපි බැලුවොත් එහෙම වයිස් චාන්සලර් පත් කරන්නේ ජනාධිපතිතුමා. ඊට අමතරව තමයි මේකේ බෝඩ් එකේ ඉන්න අය ගත්තොත් එහෙම secretary to the ministry of the minister assigned the subject of defense, additional secretary to the ministry of the minister assigned to the subject of defense, chief of defense staff, the commander of the Sri Lankan Army, the commander of the Sri Lankan Navy, the commander of the Sri Lankan Air Force, the vice chancellor of the university and a nominee of the University Grants Commission and a representative of the General Treasury. I think the Honourable Minister mentioned something about a purview of the Treasury being there. I think there's only one person to observe this. But the interesting part is that the quorum for any of these board of governors meetings is 5. So naturally, these meetings could be held without any of these nominees from the Treasury or the University Grants Commission because the quorum is only 5. So today, අපි දකිනවා මේ ජනාධිපතිතුමා 2020 බලයට ආපු ගමන් භික්ෂු පිරිවෙන් අධ්‍යාපනය කරපු ඉන්ස්ටිටියුට්ස් තිබ්බ এডুকেෂන් ඉන්ස්ටිටියුට්ස්. ඒවත් UGC එක යටතට ගේන්න කියලා මහානායක හාමුදුරුවෝ තමයි කිව්වේ. මොකද මේ භික්ෂු පිරිවෙන් අධ්‍යාපනය කරන මේ යුනිවර්සිටිස් කිසිම පිළිවෙලක් නැතුව සිදු වෙනවා කියලා ජනාධිපතිතුමා බලයට ආපු ගමන් මහානායක ස්වාමීන් වහන්සේලා හාමුදුරුවෝ කියලා තමයි අන්තිමට ඒක UGC එක යටතට ගේන්න දැන් කටයුතු කරගෙන යනවා. දැන් ගෙනල්ලත් දන්නේ නැහැ. කටයුතු කරගෙන යනවා කියලා අපි දැක්ක ඒ දවස්වල මාධ්‍ය තියෙන. ඉතින් දැන් භික්ෂුන් වහන්සේලාගේ මේ යුනිවර්සිටි එකම UGC එක යටතට ගේන්න ඕන නම් අනිවාර්යයෙන් මේකත් ගේන්න ඕනේ. මොකද දැන් මම දැක්ක මේකේ ප්‍රධානම දේවල් තමයි මේ ඩිසිප්ලින් තියෙනවා. ඩිසිප්ලින් තියෙනවා කියන්නේ යුනිවර්සිටි අධ්‍යාපනයක් වුණාම ඩිසිප්ලින් කොහොමද ඒක UGC එක යුනිවර්සිටි එක ඩිසිප්ලින් තියෙන්න ඕනේ තමයි. ඒකට හමුදාව ගෙනල්ලා ඩිසිප්ලින් කරන්න ඕනේ කියන එක මම කොයි අතනකවත් මම පිළිගන්නේ නැහැ. ඒ කියන්නේ යුනිවර්සිටි ස්ටුඩන්ට්ස් තව. ඒ වගේ තමයි අපි දකිනවා මේකෙන් වෙන්න යන දේවල්. quality of education ඇත්තටම අඩු වෙන්න යනවා. මොකද මේකෙන් ඕන කට්ටියට ඕන කිසිම මොනිටරින් ප්‍රොසෙස් එකක් නැතුව ඔය මොනවා කිව්වත් මොනවා කිව්වත් යන්න කිසිදු මොනිටරින් ප්‍රොසෙස් එකක් නැතුව තමයි මේ උසස් අධ්‍යාපනය සිදු වෙන්නේ. කැමැති විදියට ඩිග්‍රී කරයි, කැමැති විදියට පන්ති තියයි. අපි දකිනවා මේකේ මේ යන විදිය අනුව දැන් උදාහරණයක් වශයෙන් ගත්තොත් එහෙම කොතලාවල ඩිෆෙන්ස් යුනිවර්සිටි එකේ පළවෙනි PhD හෝල්ඩර් අද අපේ ඉන්න ෆොරින් සෙක්‍රටරි මිස්ටර් කොළඹගේ. එතුමාට තමයි කොතලාවල ඩිෆෙන්ස් යුනිවර්සිටි එකේ දීලා තියෙන පළවෙනි මේ PhD එක. ඉතින් එහෙම PhD දෙන්න යනවා නම් ඉදිරි අනාගතයේදී මට නම් පේන විදියට මේක මිලිටරි එකේ ඉන්න ඉහළ නිලධාරීන් ඔක්කොටම PhD දෙන්නත් දන්නේ මේක පටන් ගන්නෙ. මොකද මේ රට මිලිටරයිසේෂන් කරගෙන යන විදියට හමුදාවේ ඉන්න ඉහළ නිලධාරීන් ඔක්කොටම PhD දීලා මිලිටරි ආණ්ඩුවක් එන කාලෙක නැත්තම් ඊළඟ ආණ්ඩුව එනකොට ඇමතිවරු ඔක්කොම මේ PhD හෝල්ඩර්ස් ලෙයි. දැන් මේ PhD ගන්න බැරි අයට PhD දෙන්නත් දන්නේ මේක පටන් ගන්න තියෙනවා. ඊට අමතරව අපි තව බලන්න මොකද මේ ඇත්තටම ලැජ්ජයි ලංකාවේ තියෙන අධ්‍යාපන තියෙන රේටිං ස්ටැටිස්ටික්ස් ගත්තම ඇත්තටම ලැජ්ජයි. දැන් බැලුවොත් එහෙම සිංගප්පූරුවේ තියෙනවා නැන්යන් ඉන්ස්ටිටියුට් ඔෆ් ටෙක්නොලොජි මං හිතන්නේ. නැන්යන් ඉන්ස්ටිටියුට් එක තමයි ආසියාවේ පළවෙනි තැන තියෙන්නේ. ඒ කියන්නේ යුනිවර්සිටි රෑන්කින්ග්ස් වලින් නැන්යන් යුනිවර්සිටි ලංකාවේ ආසියාවේ පළවෙනි තැන තියෙන්නේ. මම හොයලා අපේ මේ යුනිවර්සිටි රෑන්කින්ග්ස් මම දැන් 200 ගණන් වලටත් එහා තියෙන්නේ. කොහොමද පළවෙනි 50ත් නැහැ, පළවෙනි 100ත් නැහැ. කොළඹ යුනිවර්සිටි එකත් නැහැ, පේරත් නැහැ. දැන් මේ විදිහේ තව එකක් ආවොත් එහෙම ලංකාවේ ඉගෙනගෙන වෙන රටකට ගිහිල්ලා PhD එකක්වත් කරන්න යන මාස්ටර්ස් එකක්වත් කරන්න යන අයගේ පිළිගැනීම මොකද්ද? ඉතින් මේක ගැන අපි තාම තුනන්තුවෙන් හොයලා බලන්න. මොකද මේ විදිහට ඕන විදිහට ඩිග්‍රී දෙන්න ගියොත් එහෙම කිසිම පිළිවෙලක් නැති විදිහට ඩිග්‍රී දෙයි. ලංකාවේ ඉගෙනගෙන යන ළමයට පිළිගැනීමක් ජාත්‍යන්තරෙත් නැති වෙයි කියන එකත් මම මේ අවස්ථාවේ අනිවාර්යෙන් කියන්න ඕනේ. ඒ වගේම තමයි මට දැනගන්න අවශ්‍යයි මොකද සාමාන්‍යයෙන් ඩිෆෙන්ස් එක ගැන අපි මොන හරි එකක් ප්‍රශ්නයක් අහපු ගමන් කියනවා ජාතික ආරක්ෂාවට මේක අනතුරක් කියන්න බෑ. ඔන්න ඔක තමයි අපිට කියන්නේ. ඉතින් අපිට පාර්ලිමේන්තු මන්ත්‍රී කෙනෙක්ටවත් දැනගන්න බෑ මොනවාද ලංකාවේ තියෙන මේ ආරක්ෂ ඩිෆෙන්ස් එකේ ප්‍රතිවේටක් ගාලා කියයි ද්‍රවිඩ ජාතික සන්ධානයේ මන්ත්‍රී අන්න කොටි අහනවා ඩිෆෙන්ස් ප්ලෑන් එක ගිහිල්ලා කියන්න වෙන්නේ නැති කියලා. ඒකට නෙමෙයි. මාත් ශ්‍රී ලාංකීය පුරවැසියෙක් මටත් දැනගැනීමේ අයිතියක් තියෙනවා මොකද්ද මේ ලංකාවේ තියෙන ඩිෆෙන්ස් පොලිසි එක කියලා. මොකද අද බැලුවොත් එහෙම ඩිෆෙන්ස් පොලිසිය මම මොකටද කියලා අහන්නේ මට මතකයි මම නිවුස් එක කියුවා මෛත්‍රීපාල සිරිසේන
whilst listening to the speeches made by members of the government and also members from the opposition, I couldn't help wondering whether the government benches have the same bill as that of the opposition. Because there is a total disconnect with regards to the arguments that we are putting forward. You see, Honorable Presiding Member, my understanding of a university is one of free thinking. You must encourage free thinking, freedom of thought, freedom of expression, freedom of assembly. The fact that you can almost push the limits to explore ideas is what's crucial in bringing about change. And it is through change that you progress. I mean, I would think that that is the ideal university. People's thoughts that I might not respect must have a place. That must also be, the arguments must also be gone into. And eventually it is society that must decide which avenue you want to pursue. But can that sort of culture in fact be incorporated into a university or a academy or any higher institution of learning that is specifically targeting the military? We all know the military's training, their thought processes are completely different. Normal universities, in fact, do not have military related studies. Those are kept aside for very specialized institutions. And those institutions that cater to the military and the armed forces have a certain a certain conduct that does not permit the sort of free thinking that is encouraged normally in universities. I don't think in Sri Lanka you have any university that encourages that sort of free thinking. But certainly you can't expect that sort of free thinking within the military, because the whole purpose of the military and its whole culture is the complete opposite to what we want to see in a fairly good, progressive university culture. So it is for that purpose that military universities or academies are created as special purpose institutions. Now the Sir John Kothalavala University, under this bill that is being contemplated, is in fact going to expand its purpose to bring in ordinary citizens and students who do not even want a job in the military, who are not even going to pursue a career in the military, but within that ethos of a military institution. That, honorable presiding member, is militarization of society. There is no other word for it. You want to bring in ordinary members of society who want to pursue ordinary jobs into an institution that is essentially military in thinking and outlook, so that you indoctrinate them into a particular purpose and let them out in society, so that society in itself ceases to be vibrant and in fact does the complete opposite, becomes subservient to a dictatorship. That can be the only justification for wanting to expand the scope of this, what is essentially a military institution, to incorporate civilians and civilian learnings. Now, this is not something that is surprising, honorable presiding member. I in fact want to dedicate the rest of my comments to a phrase that I actually used during the last budget debate under the Ministry of Defence, head of the committee stage. I said that what is happening in this country is what happened to the Tamils yesterday, what is happening to the Muslims today, and that will happen to the Sinhalese tomorrow. And I made that comment knowing fully well that this government is in fact going to militarize society. And that is why I made those comments under the Ministry of Defence. Now, if you take the Northeast, honorable presiding member, we have a situation where, as you know, after the end of the war, the economy of the people of the Northeast was completely smashed. People could not make ends meet. They had lost everything. The government did not choose to protect their very vulnerable economies of the people. Instead, they just basically opened up the Northeast to the rest of the country to come and compete, and people just could not compete. They were forced to take loans that they could not repay because they did not have the expertise to compete with the rest of the country. And at the same time, what the government did was, the government under the Civil Security Department, CSD, established on the 13th of September 2006, opened up that department to essentially former LTT cadres and highly vulnerable members of the civilian population of the Northeast, where they were incorporated into this department to serve in military-run farms and to serve as preschool teachers. Those ordinary people who just could not afford a living had no choice. So you pauperize them on the one hand, and then you offer military-run institutions giving pays of up to 30,000 rupees a month, which is almost 5 times that a preschool teacher in the Northeast can possibly afford. So they pauperize the most vulnerable sections of society, And then the military in itself runs farms and employs preschool teachers for 5 times the salary that is available outside, even in private institutions, and you co-opt them into the military. All these personnel are forced to take military training, and it becomes a militarized society, a society that becomes subservient to what is essentially an expanded intelligence community. It stifles debate, it stifles political activities, and so on and so forth. Now, if you look at what is happening in the Jaffna University, it's the same thing. There was a legal academic, one of the brightest young legal academics that have come into being, certainly from the Jaffna University, and also arguably when compared to any other university that this country has produced. That academic was also a practicing lawyer. He challenged society, he challenged the system at various turns. He filed cases. He looked out for human rights. And what does the military do? It puts pressure on the UGC, and then through the UGC to the Jaffna University Council, to essentially tell that legal academic that he cannot practice if he wants to continue as the Dean of Law. And that young academic, to his credit, did not submit. Instead, he chose to leave the university. So you have the military, even in the case of universities already, when the appointing authority of a vice chancellor is the president, and the president being the commander-in-chief, already he is taking the military's advice even before he makes the appointment of the most important person in a university. Okay, let's say that that is permitted. But to have the military dictate terms to the UGC in that way and stifle probably one of the most potentially greatest legal minds that this country can produce, and then eventually finding out that that action they took was quite convenient, extending it to all the other universities where no one in the legal field can practice, I think just demonstrates how the militarization within the Northeast since the end of the war was used as a test case to see how far they can push it even in the rest of the country. I am probably the greatest critic of Sri Lanka's current military. But there can be no doubt that the country needs a military. And there can be no doubt that the military must be a highly specialized institution. But to make that institution permeate into society at large will only make society impotent, because it will be a society that cannot think. It will be a society that falls into a straitjacket, and it will be a society that accepts a dictatorship willingly. That is what is at stake, Honorable Presiding Member. I say it again. Yesterday it was the Tamils. Today it's the Muslims. Tomorrow it will be the Sinhalese themselves. Because that is the direction this path can only lead to. I thank you.
இது போன்ற பல செய்திகளை தெரிந்து கொள்ள நம்முடைய சமூகம் மீடியா யூடியூப் சேனலை சப்ஸ்கிரைப் செய்து அருகில் உள்ள பெல் பட்டனை கிளிக் செய்யுங்கள். மேலும் செய்திகளை உடனுக்குடன் தெரிந்து கொள்ள SamugamMedia.com என்ற இணையதளத்தின் வாயிலாக எங்களுடன் இணைந்திருங்கள்.